Hey folks, Alan Mandic, the Hot Rod Hippie here, C10 Build vlog number 5. I'm working on the truck today, and I'm actually working on some of the sheet metal panels. I thought I might show you a little bit of what it is that I'm doing. Maybe keep this one a bit of a shorter video, but I've got some hands-on stuff that some panel fitment ideas and thoughts that I think you might find interesting. I'm working on a panel that on this 1965 GMC is a bugger. Most of these trucks that I look at, I think this panel that I'm working on fits like crap. The panel in question that I'm talking about is this filler piece for the side of the cowl. It goes between the door, the hood, and over top of the fender. This is a weird design on this vehicle, and like I said, so many of these trucks that I see, you get bad gaps to the hood, or this panel doesn't fit to the cowl worth a damn. At the moment, the biggest thing I don't like is I don't love this gap here. I wish that was a little tighter, but it somewhat matches this cowl side gap, so I think I may stick with that rather than build that out or extend that out. I might leave that alone because it's pretty consistent all the way along here. What I don't like is the fit to the door here and the cowl here. This corner needs to come up to match the shape of the door better and to match the shape of the cowl better. So what I've done is I've actually cut spot welds from all the way back here to down around here so that this whole corner of the piece can flare up smoothly without binding up anywhere or creating marks or divots anywhere. It's free to kind of release and come up. I do have to pry it up to get it there though. You can see here one of the spot welds I cut. This one was actually broken and needed to be repaired. And that's why I always check spot welds on these older vehicles. This spot weld didn't hold up after 55 years of service and it needs to be addressed. What I actually end up doing in here is sticking a screwdriver in here and prying this up until it matched that cowl in an area that I liked. And then I marked a line there at the bottom edge of that flange so that when I get to the bench, I can pull this up to where I need it to be, clamp it, and then weld it in position. Couldn't I have adjusted this panel to get it where it needs to be? One of the problems is that this bolt up here, this bolt location at the top, I could pry up on that, but doing so would pull the rest of this panel a little bit flatter to the body. And it's really pretty good of a fit to the door side right now, to the door skin. I wasn't happy with the idea of trading one thing for another. When you're assembling a really good build, if you took time to do things like this, you don't have to remember what kind of shim stack you're gonna need when it comes to assembly later. You can save yourself a lot of trouble in that regard. You can also get yourself in trouble because if you don't do it well enough, if you just kind of fudge it and you just push it into position, you might get to a point where once it's bodyworked and painted and baked and all that, it won't fit again properly, and then you don't have the room of shims to allow you to push that panel into position. I don't want to make it so this panel has to be manipulated. I don't want to have to pry it into shape to get it to be where I want it to be. I want it to be relaxed. I want it so that when you put it on there, you line it up at the bolt holes, you line up one or two of the edges on it, and it'll bolt right in. That is it. Now that I removed that driver's side cowl panel, you can see I left that very end spot weld because that end of the panel is fitting pretty well to the cowl. But then every other spot weld along here, I went ahead and cut or was already broken on its own. Back to this corner here. I've got this chisel in here, lifting up the piece to kind of get it where I need it to be. Time to go ahead and clamp that in position and weld up those spot welds in their new home. So I've now welded this up. I've welded a handful of spot welds back in their original positions. Just now you can see that little rust line where the area is picked up so that this whole corner now wings up. I've got a few more back here to do, and I want to do this whole front edge here. Now what I would do if I had more time with this project is that I would actually fully separate the inner structure from the outer structure, sandblast and strip it, primer it, and then put it back together. Unfortunately, this project is just taking too much time and I can't afford the time to do that. It is time consuming because when you go ahead and put the skin back onto the inner structure, you've really got to get it right so that it all matches up to the body. But I would be in a position to do all these little minor changes that I'm doing now if I had done that. That can be a real serious can of worms. Sometimes when you remove a piece like this from its inner structure, it'll spring and it'll distort because the only thing that held it in position was the inner structure. You have to figure out what's gonna work right for your project. For this project, I just need to keep moving, unfortunately. And one more note, when I welded this area right here, which is the part that actually meets to the cowl piece that goes across the firewall, I put a clamp right about here. You can see how the piece now kind of wings up to the left there. The reason that I did that is originally this was flat. Where the cowl piece meets up here has a swoop to it. It's not flat. However, these pieces, for whatever reason, are made flat where they meet up with it. So I took it upon myself to go ahead and create that sweep so that this piece and this piece just match up that little bit better. And now I've got these all welded up. New welds on there, and I clamped it like this between each weld to go ahead and hold that nice and tight together, so that's all much more reinforced now. The last thing I'm going to do is each of these corners on this thing are just folded around corners. They're open. What I like to do when I find corners like this is I go ahead and I weld them up. I'm going to run a little weld bead down there and then I'll sand that off so it's the same corner, maybe a slight radius to it. It gives just a little bit more finished of a look, and it prevents future cracks from forming because of any stress I might have introduced from all of this reshaping that I've done, or just time might naturally create. There's that corner welded up, that one welded up, that one ended up a bit like a big ball, and that one as well. Now you might notice that those look a little bit built up and ugly snail welds on there, and I did that on purpose. I try and weld really cool. I'm really fluctuating on the TIG pedal while I'm doing corners like that because it's very, very easy to burn back into that metal too much and blow away the corner, and I don't want to have to put a piece in there. I can do it with thicker filler rod. Like normally I weld sheet metal with like 035, 045 filler material. I used 1/16 to do those corners, so I just fill that up really nicely. I'm gonna just sand off most of that anyway. And I want it to fill in there because I want it to penetrate. If the weld penetrates into that corner really well, I can shape that corner a little bit and create a better finished looking corner without having to worry about burning into or digging in or blowing through the metal when I grind on it. Now, something else I didn't really show much of was I was actually coming over to the truck and I was mocking that panel up on there. Say when I first tacked one of those corners into the raised position, I came over and I checked it on the truck. And then I went back and I welded up that one edge. And then I tacked the next corner and I brought it over to the truck and I checked it again. I'm doing that because at any point, even the weld could pull it into a position, or I think I have it clamped where I want it and I'm wrong. And the time to figure that out is while I have one weld on it, not 10. I actually have one more thing I've decided this morning that I'm going to do to that panel. I ground down a lot of the welds, not all of them yet on this thing, cleaned up the corners on it, but I've decided this one mounting flange needs to be modified. Now this mounting flange down here, I know when this is installed on the truck, this bolt is all the way at the back of this adjustment hole, but more so than that, this flange hangs past the firewall a little bit. So I don't need this additional area of the panel. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna completely fill this hole up. I'm gonna cut back this bracket a little bit and drill a new hole further back so I can work with this panel and have it just look that much better. So I filled in the original hole, and now I put a brand new 1/2 inch hole in, which is about 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch smaller than the original size hole, like that one, that was here, because I don't need that much adjustment in there. I moved it closer toward the actual side of the panel, so it's closer to where I need it to be. And now I'm laying out lines on how I'm actually going to go ahead and trim this back. You can see I'm losing quite a bit, like 3/16 of an inch off the edge of this flange, because it just doesn't need to be there. It's in my way. It's just making additional metal to this panel, make it uglier. It doesn't need to be that way. So let's cut it up. To actually cut the rounded corner and remove the material, I'm just using some hand snips so I can get close to the line accurately, not have to worry about cutting too much with a saw or grinder or something like that. Then to really nail the line, I'm just lightly using a hand die grinder with a sanding disc on it just to smoothly get to that rounded off corner that I want, making sure to float the grinder, not sit in one spot. You've seen here now that I got this panel on, how I trimmed that bracket back, and I actually could still stand to trim just a hair more off of it. So what I did is I got this all adjusted to the point where I'm happy with the hood gap, and I've got this bolt tightened down. So I traced around the bolt washer so I know where I can trim to trim this bracket back just that little bit more to make it perfect. So I can pop it off here, trim it one last time, and then this panel's done. These are the details that make a project really come together and make the details stand out or not stand out. A lot of the time, the details that make a really good car look good are the ones you barely, if at all, notice. These are the things that somebody walks up to a car and they just go, man, this thing looks good, it's clean. I can't put my finger on why. It's stuff like that. It's when you walk up to a car and you see a tab hanging over the edge of a piece, you don't think about it because, well, that's just kind of how cars are. They're made that way. It doesn't have that thing sticking out and staring you in the face. That's the time when you just get to appreciate the overall picture, look at it and go, that's nice. That's what we're aiming for when we're building a good quality custom car. And that is the final fit of this panel. I've got it on there. You can see I'm fitting pretty happy. I've got just that slight swoop up here that I added in. This corner is meeting up into this A-pillar area really nicely, and I'm now following this door line pretty happily. Now clearly getting this one piece was not a particularly simple process, and now you have to magnify that by an entire project. This is actually a fairly complicated piece because of how everything comes together. This one panel has to line up with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other panels, just this one piece. So that really does complicate matters. Another important note to make here, I knew already that the cowl panel, the hood, and the door were all pretty much exactly where I wanted them to be. I could not go modifying and getting this piece to be where I wanted it to be if I didn't know the other panels were there. If you start just modifying one thing, then you realize, oh no, the hood wasn't where I wanted it to begin with. Well, what did you actually do? You just hurt yourself in the end. This is yet another vlog where I realized that now that I'm here, I didn't really finish the video out. So that's gonna wrap it up for this project. That piece fits so much better. I had to do quite a bit of the same on the other side. On the other side, I actually ended up releasing the whole front edge of the piece where it meets the hood because there was a big step between the hood panel and that cowl piece. So it just had to step up further. That was the big thing that I had to do there. Other than that, that one fit pretty well right out of the box. And that just shows you how these two pieces, to my knowledge, they're both original to this truck, but they fit in entirely different ways. And who knows, you know, they might have been replaced sometime in the 55 years this truck's been alive. I can't say what's happened in this truck in its lifetime. I just know what I'm building out of it now. All right, folks, one quick little aside from me to you, please consider checking out the Patreon account, patreon.com/HotRodHippie. That directly supports the HotRodHippie YouTube channel and other social media accounts so that I can produce content for you folks, showing you in both photo and video form how I do things, teach you the things, product reviews, all that stuff has to come from somewhere, and devoting all the time that it takes to create the content that you folks want to see. It's a full-time job, and I'm trying to aim toward making it a full-time job so I can show you folks exactly what you want to see in the detail that you want to see it in. Check out the account, patreon.com/HotRodHippie, and consider directly supporting this channel, please. Thank you for coming around, folks. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please go ahead and drop the video a like. Let me know in the comments down below. Do you want to see more of this hands-on stuff? Did you enjoy this project that I showed you here? Let me know in the comments down below. Go ahead and get subscribed to keep up to date with all the HotRodHippie content. Thanks for coming around, folks.